Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order. I think there might be some interest in the topic at hand based on the number of people here today. So we're excited to start our work on housing affordability. So, Ruffin, you want to start?
Certainly. I just want to take a moment to say thank you to the Mayor and Council for scheduling this special work session right before the holidays.
Do you mean that?
Yes! Yes, I do.
Right before
the
holidays.
That's good. Well, you know, I think it demonstrates how much energy, excitement, and interest there is in the topic, so it can give us something to work on over the holidays. So that's good. I do want to say that the staff is really excited about this. I think the topic of affordable housing is something that's not only really critical to the city as a community, but also to us as an organization. As the manager, I have an opportunity often to attend conferences or work with managers in other large cities across the country. And without question, affordable housing is one of the top 2 or 3 topics in every major city in the country right now. It is a prominent topic, and there is a lot of material out there on it. And you know, you can really start digging into the details of this and get consumed in the complexity and the difficulty. But what's really important is that we're all committed to this as a priority. And so we're assuming that's something that's important to you as well. Affordable housing as a policy topic can be large in scope and quite complicated. So one of the things that we wanted to try to do today is to level set a little bit of that, and that helps those who are perhaps new to this conversation, but also for those that have been around and working on this for a while. There's some refreshers in there that you may learn from that you may have forgotten, but this is a good opportunity to remind us all of that. We also want to acknowledge that there are lots of partnerships in this space. So this isn't just a city thing. It's not even just a private sector thing. It's lots of different local governments. It's lots of nonprofits. It's lots of private interests. And the only way that we believe from a policy perspective that you would be able to really make significant change is you have to work with other groups in order to be in that space. So with that, I'll introduce Larry Jarvis, our Director of Housing and Neighborhoods, and he's going to walk us through a couple of things as it relates to how we're going to try to transmit some of this information to you today, and then we look forward to your feedback.
So one thing before Larry comes up, I just want to also welcome and thank our friends from Durham for being here. Mayor Steve Schul, Karen Leda, right? Yes, and Charlie Reese over there. Charlie, stand up for a minute.
Hi, everybody.
Is that not an outfit or what? So anyhow, thank you all for being here. It means a lot to us. One of the things we hope to do is learn what you did, and Larry comes from Durham, so you know he knows, but we want to build on that success as a region. So thank you for being here, Larry.
Thank you, and I did want to acknowledge who I have behind me: Ken Bowers, Planning Director; Nikki Jones, Assistant Director of Housing and Neighborhoods. We first wanted to start with a brief video. Okay, thank you. And then we will go through a few slides, but first let's look at a video.
Since 2015, the number of affordable housing options in Raleigh has significantly increased. We adopted an affordable housing policy in 2016. The policy calls for adding 570 affordable housing units per year for the next 10 years. That means 5,700 new affordable housing units. We have focused our efforts on affordable apartments. An example is the new rental development, Washington Terrace, where Barbara Tarrant lives.
DHC did exactly what they said it was going to do from day one until the day that we moved into the new development. I feel safer here. I didn't have a kitchen where I can go in and eat dinner with my kids. The place is much bigger than the old part was. It's just a better living. It's a better atmosphere.
We've also added more new home construction projects, like this house where Marquita Jordan and her son Bryson live.
This is literally my dream come true. And so I do thank the city of Raleigh for opening up these type of programs and to allow someone such as myself, who is a mother, who is mid-career, who, you know, makes enough to be able to say, I can move into a home without struggling and be able to provide my child with a positive, adequate future.
In addition, we provide homeowner rehabilitation grants, just like the one that Queen Person used to fix up her home.
If it hadn't been for this program, I would not have been able to get the work done that I needed to do. And they did everything that needed to be done. And I'm, like I said, I'm a happy woman.
We also provide assistance to folks who need help coming up with their down payment for their new home loans. And finally, we provide services to the homeless by helping them find shelter and rapid rehousing. Affordable housing in Raleigh is key to community vitality and continued economic growth. We're off to a good start, and we have more to do.
So thank you for giving us the opportunity to show you that. We just wanted to kind of put some faces with some of the programs that you hear about. So this morning we're going to take about 20 minutes to, as the manager said, kind of level set things, to kind of give you a brief overview of where we are with the housing challenge that we have not only in Raleigh but throughout the country right now. We won't have time this morning to go into much of a deep dive, but what you might want to think about doing is flagging things where you want to have some more detailed discussions later on, and we'll be happy to do that. But today we're going to keep things at a very high level, recognize that we do have some new members of council, and a lot of the information we'll be presenting is new to them as well. So current market conditions, we're not telling you anything here that you're not already aware of, that we are experiencing incredibly rapid growth. Household income is not keeping pace with housing costs. We have housing shortages across the board in terms of all types and all price points, and that is an incredible point to keep in mind, is that we have a serious imbalance in supply and demand. And we've got a lot of older affordable housing that is being redeveloped, particularly in near downtown sites. This is a graph, it's a little bit dated right now, but this shows simply between 2007 and 2015, the increases in the cost of rental housing and homeownership units versus increases in wages, and you can see that the gap just keeps getting wider. This is a trend that's been going on for decades. If you were to look at this nationally, you will see that again, what we talk about a housing crisis, but what we're really experiencing is a fundamental shift in our economy. Raleigh and Wake County are among the fastest growing in the country. You can see here that between 2000 and 2015, Wake County grew by 63%. We talk about other fast-growing municipalities that we're often compared to. Charlotte in that same period was only growing at 42%. Austin, Texas, Travis County, one that we're often compared to, 83%. So Austin has some of those same affordability challenges that we do. All that compared to a national growth average in the United States of 12% compared to our 63% in that same period. All that is leading up to having cost-burdened renters, and your cost burden if you're paying more than 30% of your income towards rent and utilities. And this is the situation we had at the time that the Affordable Housing Improvement Plan was adopted by City Council in 2015. And at that point in time, we had almost 32,000 cost-burdened renters and 16,000 that were paying more than 50% of their income towards rent and utilities. So historically, the city has focused on three different types of affordable housing programs: rental, tax credits typically, and land disposition. Different types of homeownership assistance, whether it's assisting existing homeowners with repair or rehab needs, providing down payment assistance, or creating new homeownership units. We also work with folks who are experiencing homelessness. We help support operating costs for emergency shelters. We're a partner in Oak City Cares. We focus on rapid rehousing with our homeless populations. Wake County takes more of a focus on prevention. We didn't want to duplicate efforts. We wanted to complement efforts there. So prior to 2015, again, as I kind of just mentioned, we were doing homeowner repair and rehab, assisting first-time home buyers. We were acquiring blighted property for redevelopment. We were supporting homeless shelters. And when you look at the level of affordable rental development that we had done, prior to that, it was about 137 units a year. And when we talk about rental development, what we are talking about for the most part are tax credit projects, and we'll talk more about those in a minute. So in 2015, and the mayor was a member of council at that point in time, we adopted an affordable housing improvement plan. And from a policy perspective, there were several significant things that that plan did. First, it established that affordable rental housing was the priority. It authorized solicitation and support of 4% tax credit projects. You'll hear us talk about 4% versus 9% tax credit projects. The 9% are limited. They're always fully utilized in Wake County. The only place that there is unlimited capacity and there is the opportunity to build production and volume is the 4%. So it was really critical that council support that. But we recognized that to solicit 4% projects that we were going to need additional housing funding sources. What that plan also called for was the development of East College Park and Washington Terrace. And again, from a policy perspective, that was the first time that we had directly linked affordable housing to transit. And that was in our affordable housing location policy. So I wanted to show you an example of a 4% tax credit project. So this is the Village at Washington Terrace. It is 162 rental units. It had a total project cost of almost $32 million. So I want you to look just briefly at the different sources of financing, with the second line item being most important, the tax credit equity. So that's what tax credit investors pay into that project for them to be able to benefit from tax credits over some period of time. So you can see that the City of Raleigh's contribution here was $8.6 million. Our money typically goes into projects like this as soft money. What that means is that it doesn't amortize. It's there. We might get partial payments over some period of time, but these are not loans that we have an expectation of getting repaid. That was one of the things, as again the mayor will tell you, when the affordable housing plan was adopted by council, it was with the understanding that the affordable housing itself was the return on the investment that we were making. But in exchange for that, you can see what the affordable rents are. You can see that we have some one-bedroom units with rents as low as $592. Most of them are at that $692 level, but we also have some two-bedroom units that are $800 a month, $884, and compared to rents and market rate developments, particularly those near downtown, you know that these are extremely affordable. Booker Park North, we were able to do that one under the 9% tax credit program. And again, looking at the financing sources, you can see here that the tax credit equity for that 72 units was over $6 million a year. Because the equity was richer, if you will, our contribution was substantially less than the other. Well, this is $2.2 million, but again, it's in there as soft money that we really don't expect to be repaid over the life of the project. You can see here, this was an elderly project, so we have some one-bedrooms with rents as low as $420 a month, then some at $520, and then some at $705. But again, compared to market rate projects, these are very affordable. Just wanted to give you a brief recap of the history of housing bonds going back to 1990 with 20 million, most recent one being 2011 with 16 million. And again, we talked about the penny for affordable housing the council approved in 2016, and that generated over $6 million annually for investment primarily in tax credit projects. And again, at a 9%, we're looking at 10 to 15,000 per unit. 4%, we might put 20 to 30,000 per unit in those projects. After passing the 1 cent on the tax rate, then council turned to setting a goal, and they decided on a goal of 5,700 units over a 10-year period. Again, with most of those being rental units, 450, 150 under the 9% program, 300 under the 4%. And you can see how we have invested those funds. This shows the revenues going back to even prior to the 1 cent on the tax rate. And what's significant here is that in addition to that, in addition to the penny on the tax rate, there have been additional monies approved by City Council. As recently as this spring, Council approved as a part of the budget process $4.7 million in 2/3 bond to be able to meet all of our commitments for tax credit request. And in the previous year, I think it was around $2 million in one-time money that council approved. At that point in time, we were committing to over 1,000 affordable units, affordable rental units. So this kind of tells the story in terms of the impact of having solicited those 4% tax credit deals, in terms of how we've been able to ramp up production, looking there at 2014 and where we are now in 2018 and 2019. You can see that we have achieved with the 4% and this 1 penny exactly what we wanted to do. And again, going back and putting faces with the folks who benefit from our programs. This was one of our buyers in East College Park who benefited from down payment assistance. A low to moderate income buyer also in East College Park. The rehabilitation program is still important, and this was a gentleman whose home was rehabilitated with $72,000 in the form of a forgivable loan. And this is one of our residents of East College Park. Again, he and his family are able to live there and benefit from that affordable rental housing. So we wanted to stop now because we've talked about wanting to do additional things through the regulatory approaches. So I'm going to let Ken Bowers just briefly touch on some of these things. Then we're going to come back and look at some additional possible steps.
So we know that the council, in addition to looking at how we can more effectively leverage money for subsidized affordable housing, has an interest in looking at our current development regulations and how they can aid the market in producing market rate housing at more affordable price points in more locations. So these are all topics that either have received some sort of discussion in a public forum or have been suggested by past work by the council. Things with the check marks are things I put on the list that actually have been implemented by some recent tech changes. And we group them into three categories. One is density and diversity. So more different types of units on a given unit of land in more places is basically what this would do. And one thing that was recently approved by the City Council was allowing cottage courts to be built at 50% more than the density of the base residential district in which they're located. There's other things. We could change the zoning map to allow more density through overlays or other zoning tools near our proposed bus rapid transit investments. Accessory dwellings, obviously, is a way to put more units on a given in a given unit of land by allowing 2 units on a lot. And then missing middle housing types, there was discussion in the Safe, Vibrant, Healthy, the committee formerly known as Healthy Neighborhoods, but now Safe, Vibrant, Healthy Communities, of looking at, should we redefine attached dwelling units to include up to 4 units in a building? Should we allow those on lots in our zones? Under what circumstances? We were asked to research what Portland was doing. They're actually capping the size of infill houses, but allowing more square footage if you put more units in the house to sort of level the playing field between the really large, luxurious houses and a more multiple unit approach. And then going back to where we were pre-2013, should we look at townhouses in R6? They're only currently permitted in R10, not in any residential district, and what would be the allowed density? There's also things we could do to look at the cost of building housing units and the cost of the approval process. So one thing that was recently changed was in general, public streets built to public standards are more expensive to build than private streets. Ordinance was amended to allow townhouse lots to front on private streets and drives. You could reduce parking requirements, particularly for development types that have parking garages. That's a lot of money, $20,000 to $30,000 per space added to the cost of the unit. So in places that can get by with fewer parking spaces, that's a good way to lower the cost of development. Making sure that approvals for housing are by right and they go through the process in an expedited manner. And then we can't necessarily reduce fees, but we could rebate or do other financial incentives for certain housing types. The last thing is the notion of voluntary inclusionary zoning. And the city has stuck its toe into the water on 2 recent zoning cases by accepting conditions that talked about affordable housing units that would provide some inclusionary units as part of some fairly large-scale upzonings. One on the Raleigh Union Station bus site that was brought forward by Go Triangle, and the other one on a 40-story zoning at the intersection of Peace and Capitol by Kane Realty. There's also something that's been talked about but never implemented in the city since our old downtown overlay district was retired, which would be basically providing some sort of bonus program in return for affordable units. Essentially saying you've got a by right density and the ability to also by right build more densely than that or taller than that in return for the provision of some affordable units. So this is sort of our take on what the universe of ideas are that are floating around. Other than the ones with the check marks, none of these have really advanced to any serious level of policy development.
Can we have the ability to talk more about this at the end?
Yes.
Okay.
So in addition to what Ken just presented, there are additional next steps. Again, the Affordable Housing Plan that was adopted by Council in 2015 was a 5-year plan. So that means in 2020, we're due for an update to that plan. So we need to look at updating our data, updating our needs, and trend analysis, looking at expanding on what we're already doing. Same thing with the Affordable Housing Location Policy. That needs to be updated, and there would be updating our concentration thresholds and see if those still work or whether they need to be changed. Something that we will be focusing very much on in the coming months is the whole issue of equitable development around BRT. There we're talking about land use policies and we're talking about stationary planning. And we want to make sure, as we just alluded to, that we examine and prioritize land use policies for affordable housing. And last but certainly not least, a bond referendum that is backed by stakeholder engagement. So some of the things that we think as we undertake all these work products that some of the things we want to look for and look at and consider. I think we want to look at partnership models with major employers and developers to increase supply. Again, we have relied on the tax credit project process, which has been very successful. It's served us well, but we want to see what other workable models might be out there. Again, we've heard a lot about how long it takes for even affordable housing projects to get approved. So again, as Ken alluded to, we do want to look at expedited permitting in addition to expanded housing choices. We want to look at the financial feasibility of creating affordable housing outside of the traditional tax credit program. We want to look, or we think that you want to look at non-traditional housing options, and there we're talking about things like micro units and co-housing. On the West Coast, co-housing serves a lot of needs, whether it's seniors who need that socialization and they need a living environment that keeps them from feeling isolated, to younger people who are just into the sharing economy. But we've got an opportunity to expand that range of housing types. We just need to make sure that we look at what would be the barriers to being able to utilize some of those things. And again, as we look at what the method is of stakeholder engagement that we're going to use to do all of these things, not only updating our affordable housing plan, but also crafting an affordable housing bond referendum, we'd want to look at how do we best achieve consensus around priorities, programmatic area funding levels and outcomes, and achieving the broadest possible community support. So again, those are kind of things that we think should kind of guide our work. Those are desirable outcomes, but we'll leave that to you. So we can either come back to that last slide after we hear from Mayor Schul. It's up to you.
Yes, let's let Mayor Schul come up, please.
All right, Steve?
Thank you.
Again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for inviting me, and congratulations on your election. I got to know you on the Go Triangle board, and I know you're going to do a fabulous job. I guess I should tell a little story, which is that the night that Mr. Francis conceded, I didn't have the mayor's phone number. I called Sig Hutchinson and said, Sig, I would like the mayor's phone number. I'd like to call her and congratulate her. And he said, well, she's standing right here. So talked to her on the phone and congratulated her, and she said, I just want you to know one thing. I said, what that? She said, we're going to kick Durham's fanny. And I said, well, nothing's changed just because she was elected mayor. And
I hated it because he was always like out there a step ahead of us, and I was like, we're coming after you. Yes.
well, congratulations. I know you're going to do a fabulous job, and very much looking forward to working with you and the council. And congratulations to the new council members and those council members who I've known and worked with previously, and very much looking forward to it. And the mayor mentioned to me earlier, this is intimately related to housing, but which is our transportation needs and our need to cooperate on the commuter rail and other transportation work that we have to do together, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yep.
And so congratulations to all of you all. I also want to thank Larry Jarvis for inviting me. Larry was in Durham, as you all know, and did a wonderful job for us before you stole him. But it's great to see Larry again, and appreciate it. I did find out that I coached Nikki Jones's wife in soccer, so I have a lot of great connections here. My colleague Charlie Reese is here, the one in the fabulous coat, and want to thank Charlie for being here, as well as Karen Lotto, who is our Assistant Director of Community Development for Strategy, and is the person that really knows this housing stuff and has done a wonderful job creating our strategy that we can fulfill. Greg Warren, of course, works in Durham as well as Raleigh and is here today. And Will Allen, my colleague on the Go Triangle board. And so glad to see so many friends. We did have a very successful bond referendum in November. It was, I love the mayor's calling her plan a moonshot, and I think that for us, this was very much that kind of effort. It was a $95 million affordable housing bond to be part of a $160 million five-year affordable housing plan. The bond passed with 76% voter support, and it won in every precinct. And in Durham, it's hard to win in every precinct. And so I'm very proud of our community, and we had to do a lot to get there. And I'm happy to, I thought I would just, at the mayor's request, describe how we got there, and then mostly just take your questions and hear your comments. You all know the situation in Raleigh. It's the same in Durham every day. If I walk from City Hall down to the BU Cafe, the chances are 50% that somebody's going to stop me and say they can't pay their rent. It is the only thing that I still get handwritten letters about. People come to the mayor's office, it's constant, and I know you all feel the same. I know that you all are facing the same thing. You know that the crisis is driven by market forces, and that we have a choice. We can either submit to this future that we're going to get unless we intervene boldly, which is, in our case, a rich, white, unaffordable central city. That's one choice we could have. Or we could have made a choice, which we did, to intervene boldly in that future and try to change that trajectory. And that's the choice that we made. We've done a lot of good housing work over the past several years in Durham. We have 2 cents on the tax rate that is dedicated for affordable housing. And that our penny produces about half of what your penny does. Not quite half, actually, of what your penny does. So that's been good, but it hasn't nearly been able to do the job for us. I do want to say that you all are building, I want to be really clear about one thing. Raleigh's building a lot more affordable housing than Durham is. You all are, what you're doing with your 4% tax credits is fantastic. You're doing a lot of it, and we wish we were doing as much of it as you were. We wish we had the developers coming to us with the 4% deals, and the way you all are using your tax dollars to fill the gap on 4% credits, on 4% tax credit projects is very efficient in terms of creating more affordability, and I want to congratulate the manager, Larry Jarvis, and all of you all for doing that work. It's really, that is a great way to get affordable housing built, and we wish we could do more of it. We have a lot of, another way in which I think we're different from you all is we have a lot of Durham Housing Authority property downtown, centrally located and either undeveloped, very sparsely developed, or crumbling. And I know that you all have had some Hope 6 projects and other work that has changed yours significantly in ways that ours really hasn't. But one of the things that we really tried to do in our bond, in our 5-year affordable housing plan, is to is to use that property to create mixed income communities downtown. Rehousing the Durham Housing Authority folks, 387 units in the 30 acres we're talking about, in rehousing them in good housing instead of the crumbling housing that they're in, and then creating mixed income communities on those properties. And we would do that in 2 ways. One is, because these are downtown, we know that we'll have market rate demand. So the idea would be that there'll be about a quarter of the residents will be at the Durham Housing Authority level of income, and that income level is about $12,000 a year. About a quarter would be market rate units, and then the other half would be at the tax credit affordability level, 60% of the AMI or below. So trying to create truly mixed income communities and change the situation for these housing authority residents who are bearing the double burden of poverty. Not only are they poor, but everyone around them is poor, and you all know this as well as I. And we want to change that equation. So the total cost of our 5-year affordable housing, how do we get to the $95 million? That was a question I got a lot, and I know you'll get a lot. Whatever number you choose, that's a question you're going to get a lot. And here's how we got to it. We created a $160 million affordable housing plan, and this plan took us a while to get to, and Karen Lotto, our wonderful staff person, led this, and we created a $160 million plan that the council adopted. $65 million of that comes to us in that 5-year period anyway. It comes to us through 2 sources. One of the sources is our 2 cents, and the other is our federal dollars that we get, CDBG and home, and you all get that money as well. So that's $65 million, $160 million plan, minus $65 million that we get over the 5 years. That's why the $95 million is our number for the bond. And it's, as you all know, a big number. So if you look at the piece of paper that I know Larry made available to you, it's this one right here. I'll just go through some of the big numbers on it. I already went through the top number, how we got to the $95 million. But if you look down here on this part of the page and over to the right, 15,000 is the total number of Durham residents to be assisted with housing. So our city is about 275,000 people. So just to give you a sense of what that number is. And one of the things to realize about that number is it doesn't nearly do the job. This is nowhere going to close to do the job of what we really would need to do in Durham to affordably house all of our residents or assist them with affordable housing. It is a big bite out of the apple, but we have to be clear all the time, I think, with our residents, and we have to set the expectations appropriately. That, people think you pass a $95 million bond, I voted for it, that's awesome. 2 things I think are occurring. One is, will it do the whole job? No. And the other is, how fast is this going to happen? And it's going to happen slowly. You can't build this stuff fast. You know, we haven't, you got to have the specific plans, the specific projects to come before council to be approved, for the bond money to be issued for. So we have to really, I think, manage the expectations of our residents now that the bond is passed, and that's an issue that I'm sure that you all will face as well. But 15,000 is a big number. Let me just say that it's the one number that I made up, okay? And I'll tell you how I made it up, as I say. If you look at all the other numbers on that line, 1,600 new affordable housing units, 800 affordable rental units preserved, and that's both preserved and replaced, I should say, 1,800 homeless households moved into permanent housing, 400 affordable home ownership opportunities for first-time home buyers, and 2,800 low-income renters and home buyers stabilizing their homes. This is, I think, that number adds up to something like 7,200 units. I multiplied that by 2 to come up with a number of residents. We obviously don't know the exact number of residents, but I think that's a really good estimate. And so that's how we came up with it. The tax, you'll see at the very bottom, what is the tax rate that we're going to have to do this? And so what we had 2 choices in setting the tax rate, and I'm sure you'll face this same thing. One is we could have made a more delicate estimate of when the bonds would have to be issued, because they'll be issued over time, not all at once. They'll be issued as needed. And we could have set the tax rate in that way. We could have, you know, and we received 2 models from our finance folks, as I'm sure you all can as well, which said it'll be a variable tax rate depending upon when the bonds need to be issued. Or we chose another route, which was what we called set it and forget it, which was we just said, we know this will be the maximum. It'll be 1.6 cents. We're going to tell everybody that. And I think that was a good way to go. It made it simple. I think if we'd have shown a chart that said, you know, this year it's going to be this, and, you know, I think it would have been more complicated. I think it would have invited a level of complication in people thinking about it that probably wouldn't be helpful in terms of getting a bond issue passed or in explaining it to our public. And so the best way I thought we explained it was to say that the average homeowner would have a tax increase of about $37 over a 20-year period to finance the bond. That's what it will cost you. And that was the choice we gave to people. These 2 numbers. Are we willing as a community to have the average taxpayer have an increase of $37 to help assist in housing 15,000 Durham residents affordably? That's the choice we face as a community. And fortunately, our community gave it a resounding yes. And but it was not without. I will talk about, just say for a moment, there were a lot of doubts and questions about it, and I will tell you what I think a couple of the main ones were. First is general distrust of government spending. How are you going to be spending this money? This is a big bunch of money. How are you going to spend it? Explain it to me. What kind of oversight are you going to have? That was one thing. But I think the most important doubt that we faced was doubt among our African American residents that because of our history of urban renewal, of Highway 147, the destruction of the Hayti community and other communities in Durham, that our African American community really did not trust that we were going to, when we made promises about this housing, that we were going to be able to keep them. And of course, that's still an open question. We have to be able to keep them. And we, fortunately, were able to have our African American community come on board in terms of electoral support. The Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People endorsed the bond, and our African American community voted overwhelmingly in favor of the bond. But I think that distrust is something that, our city is 40% African American, and so this is a very, very important issue in Durham, and I know it is in Raleigh as well. But I think that was the other thing that I think we had to really overcome to win people's support. I'm going to touch on just a couple of things on the back of this sheet of paper. I don't want to go through it all. I'm going to give you my, I'm giving you my just not, I'm not giving you my 2-hour version, okay? Homelessness is a big part of this bond issue. You all have that as one of your priorities. This actually doesn't include some of our federal dollars, but you can see that it does include some of our federal dollars, but not all of them. It includes, for example, the HOPWA spending. But we are really trying to change what we're doing in terms of homelessness. I don't know what Raleigh's practices are now, but we have a system now of centralized intake and a different kind of prioritization for our homelessness system. We're adding staff. Let me just say one other thing. The way I described this whole bond to people was in terms of the 5-year plan. I didn't really spend too much time trying to differentiate for people what was bond spending and what was the other kind of spending. If people ask, of course, I could do it, and it's easy to do. We can describe that. But I think people wanted to see the big picture. So you'll see that this sheet of paper, this is what I used, we all used to, make sure we explain the bond well to our community, is a $160 million plan. This pack is not just the $95 million. It's $160 million because it shows it all. So the homelessness spending, of course, is not mostly bond money. Of course, there could be some in terms of creating more permanent supportive housing, but a lot of that is around services. The multifamily rental, you'll see the biggest number here is the $59 million for redevelopment of Durham Housing Authority properties. And I explained that already. There are 5 properties downtown. There are 30 acres in crucial locations, and we're working with our Durham Housing Authority to redevelop that. The gap financing for the 4% tax credit projects, that's what you all have been killing, and we have not been killing. We really want to be able to attract more 4% tax credit projects, and now this will give us a pool of money to help do that. But you see the size of this pool. I mean, I saw what Larry projected. Sometimes you all could subsidize these deals at $2 million, and I think one of the deals was $8 million. $16 million doesn't get you too many 4% deals. So, you can see that, yeah, it's a good step, but it's not nearly everything we need to do. The multifamily production and preservation is the other big number there, the $25 million. And that number is to, we have a lot of, as you all do, we have a lot of mandatorily affordable housing communities who were previous tax credit deals that are coming out of their mandatory affordability period. We want to be in contact with them, and we've done some of this in the past, and to try to get them to continue their mandatory affordability in exchange for having renovation through city funds. If you agree to keep your housing affordable at the 60% AMI level, say, for the next 15 years, we will provide some funds for you so that you don't just take your housing market rate. And there's a lot of money there. I do want to mention the preservation outreach, which is a little bit of money there, which is a person. And what this is about is trying to find these folks who are coming out of their mandatory affordability period, actually recruiting them, working with them, and trying to figure that out with them. The down payment assistance program, you all do that. You know what that is. The neighborhood stabilization, this is money that will go to our smaller scale affordable housing developers. It increases the amount of money that we're doing to, work with CASA and Durham Community Land Trustees, and to help subsidize more of their affordability. It includes home repair and rehab, which you all are doing. We're ramping that up. Property tax outreach and homeowner education, I think, is an interesting aspect of it, which is we believe that there are a lot of people in Durham who are not taking advantage of the available state tax relief programs. We have good state tax relief programs if you are elderly or disabled or veteran. And we want to expand that outreach and at the same time educate people about alternatives to predatory sale. And so that's again, that little line there of $650,000 over the 5 years, but that's people. Eviction diversion, we hire attorneys to represent people who are being evicted in court. Those attorneys work for legal aid, but we subsidize them. We pay them, actually pay their salaries, to represent people who are potentially being evicted in eviction court. And we have 500 people in Durham a month who are being evicted. We are trying to change that. And our attorneys, in addition to this money, the county has provided social services dollars so that our attorneys can say to the attorney for the landlord, they're not really our attorneys, they're the attorneys for we hire them, but the legal aid attorneys can say to the attorneys for the landlord, give Jim another couple of months. Here's some money to fill the gap. He's looking for a job. A lot of this is things that gets worked out. And so we're evaluating that now, but we're excited about it. Employment training, again, $2.5 million for employment training for people to work on the good jobs that will be created by the bond. I'm excited by this. People in the Durham Housing Authority get first dibs on these jobs. We have, as you all do, I know in Raleigh, a lot of people who aren't sharing in your newfound prosperity, or in our case, it's newfound. You all have been prospering for a long time. And we want to help those people get trained for these good jobs. And I'll just mention one other thing. So two quickly. One, the Durham Affordable Housing Loan Fund. So what this exists now. I'm very proud of it. We have now an affordable housing loan. So let me describe this. If you're a private developer and you want and a market rate multifamily unit comes on sale, multifamily building, you're a market rate developer. You go to your bank. You're pre-qualified. You got the money. Boom, you go in there and you buy it. Our affordable housing developers aren't able, of course, to work that quickly because they need to arrange a subsidy, come to the city, get a tax credit. So what we've done with this loan fund is this. We're pre-qualifying affordable housing developers so that they can get a loan from this fund, move quickly in the market, compete with a private developer, purchase the property, and then hold it for 5 years at about 3.5% interest until they can arrange a permanent subsidy. The loan fund is now $10 million. We plan to raise it to 15. We just closed on the first $10 million. The city has provided the top loss. So the city has $2.5 million in roughly, and we provide the top loss. That has attracted the other investors. Our other investors are Duke University, North Carolina Community Development Initiative, and SunTrust Bank. They've come in at very low interest rates to allow us to do this. And because of the bond, we're going to be leveraging another $5 million. And I think we have our first 3 applicants for the loan fund who have already come to us. So we're very excited about that. And then finally, accessory dwelling unit housing preservation financing and pilots. So I know accessory dwelling units is, I guess, what is it, like kind of the third rail of Raleigh politics or something? But we actually have them, and we have loosened our regulations on accessory dwelling units, and we expect that we'll have a lot more. Right catty corner to me, there's an accessory dwelling unit that's just been built where I live. It's wonderful. We want people who cannot afford to finance an accessory dwelling unit on their own to be able to do so, because we believe for a lot of our low-income homeowners who, let's say, you've got a mortgage, or you've paid your mortgage and you've got a big piece of land, but you're living on your retirement, you don't really have much, a possible really good source of income for you is an accessory dwelling unit. And we want to help people finance that. And so that's what this is about. It's also housing preservation financing. I could describe that more, but I did want to mention the accessory dwelling units. And then now, the other thing I want to mention besides the bond is that what I am absolutely sure of is that we cannot subsidize our way out of this. The subsidized housing is critically important, and that's what the bond does. But land use is equally important. And we have just passed our expanding housing choices, which is that in our urban tier, we are making it easier to build accessory dwelling units, duplexes by right. We are allowing smaller lot sizes, flag lots, and I think that this is really important. I do have a handout which I'll give to the clerk. Sorry I didn't provide this earlier. I'm not going to talk through these details, but I do want to mention what I think are the our expanding housing choice. Our planning department did a great job of bringing this to us. They prepared us really well. They brought down some folks from other cities to talk to us about it, and our council felt very strongly that we needed to make land use a powerful tool for affordability. And so we passed expanding housing choices. I can't remember if it was unanimously or 6-1. 6-1. About a few months ago, and I'm very excited about that as well. I think that over time, this is going to have a tremendous amount of impact. It will be slow. What we predict is that in the first year, we will only add about 45 units in the urban tier as a result of expanding housing choices. That will go up over time. But I think that the fact that it's not going to be a rush of change, I think, is a good thing. It gives people comfort. I think people fear in the neighborhoods, and there was significant neighborhood opposition. I will tell you that for sure. And I know you would have the same in Raleigh. But I think one of the ways that we were able to give comfort to a lot of people is the fact that we believe that the change will be gradual, and our staff believes the change will be gradual, and I think that that's important. So, Mayor, that is what I have to say, and I'm happy to take any questions and hear any thoughts that you all have. But again, I want to congratulate you all, especially on the work that's been done around the 4% tax credits. That is a major achievement and should not be minimized.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions of Mayor Schewel?
I have a
Mr.
question.
Branch?
Thank you, Mayor, for the information and for coming and spending time with us. My question is around when you say you worked to build trust with the African American community. What did you do to do that?
Thank you. I forgot to mention one crucial step, and I'm glad you asked that. Nice to see you, Corey.
Good to see you too.
And I hear you're going to be joining us on the Go Triangle board.
I will.
And I have the honor of looking forward to swearing you in.
Thank you.
Yeah. I forgot to mention one very crucial thing that this process thing that we did. So we had built our affordable housing plan over a long period of time with a lot of community input, and our staff presented the plan to the council. We passed it. I'll just say one thing that is different about Durham is that our council is majority African American, and so when a majority African American council passes an affordable housing plan, that's a good start. But I forgot a crucial step. We set up a community advisory group, that I appointed with the council's approval. And that group was very diverse, and it included a lot of people who were, I believed were people who really needed to be bought in to make it work. So folks from the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People, I went to the leadership of the Durham Committee and Omar Beasley and asked, who would you like appointed to the advisory committee? Because I knew that their support would be crucial and that their trust would be crucial. And so they appointed their chair of their Economic Development Committee and their Housing Committee to be on our advisory group, and that was really important. They came out in favor of the bond. When the advisory committee had finished its deliberations, they came out in favor of the bond. And I'll tell you another crucial aspect of this. One of the things about this piece of paper is it changed over time. Some people didn't like that. They said, you changed that number. You got more home ownership. We started out with, I think, 200 home ownership units, 100 and something. And one of the things we heard on our advisory committee, especially from African American members, was they wanted more home ownership as part of the bond. So we knew that our number was 160 million. That wasn't going to change. Our bond number was 95 million. So we actually dropped the amount of money in our gap financing for the 4% tax credit projects and added more money for home ownership because that's what we were hearing from the African American community. The other thing that I think was crucial to our African American community was the economic development side of this. And so there were two parts to that. One I mentioned already is the jobs, that we have the job training, and that's crucially important. But the other thing that's really important is contracting. And so we really, our housing authority and our city staff did a lot of work to try to figure out exactly what we were going to be able to offer in terms of minority contracting, and that was really important. So like stepping even back from the 95 million and the 160 million, the 95 million bond issue is going to leverage about $450 million in private spending. So you're talking about a $500 million construction program. And 30% of that, at least 30, that's the floor, at least 30% of that will go to disadvantaged businesses, historically disadvantaged businesses. So that, being able to say that and to be able to say that with a lot of confidence, I think really helped. People had to trust that, and one of the ways in which they trusted it is that the Housing Authority is working with developers like Laurel Street, an African-American woman-owned developer with a lot of history around minority subcontracting and hiring. And so it was work like that that I think gave the African-American community the confidence. But I think that the crucial things were they really wanted more home ownership than we provided, more home ownership opportunities, and they wanted more around the economic development aspect of the bond. So I think those were the two crucial things. We have to deliver on that. We have to deliver on that. I mean, we have broken, our city, our nation, but our city has broken so many promises to our black community over the years. And so this is a promise we cannot break. And over the next 5 years, we need to deliver on what we say we're doing.
Okay. And my other question is, I take it your staff works very closely with your housing authority overall in developing in projects?
Yeah. I think that for a long time, Durham was like a lot of other cities where the council and the city government held the housing authority at arm's length. I mean, we appoint the housing authority board, but our housing authority was very troubled. It was, over many years, and we now have a very close relationship with our housing authority. We've been using, prior to the bond, a lot of our dedicated housing fund money from our property tax to, for example, the housing authority under the RAD program just redeveloped two housing authority communities, Maureen Road and Daymar Court. We subsidized that redevelopment. Gotcha. We have done a lot of subsidy of the redevelopment of Durham Housing Authority properties. We've actually funded, I know from Larry that you all have lots of people in Raleigh who have housing authority vouchers, right, who aren't able to get housing. We have worked, we subsidized our housing authority to help them with their voucher program. We also have, as part of our 5-year plan, and I didn't mention this, we have landlord outreach as part of our affordable housing plan. We have a nonprofit organization, Community Empowerment Fund, that has an RFP that, we had an RFP, and this organization is the recipient of those funds. And what they do is they work with landlords to try to get them to take Section 8 tenants and formerly homeless people with disabilities that come through our homeless system. Because we all know that our ability to do that is diminishing. And so the other thing that we do as part of this plan is we offer landlords an incentive. A lot of times landlords who are reluctant to take people with vouchers or who are formerly homeless with disabilities will do so if they are, we'll give them the first month's rent, as a way to incentivize them to take these folks. And we used to offer on the back end a risk mitigation fund, but that really wasn't working. So now we're offering it up front. And we're just beginning that, but we're hopeful that will be successful.
Mayor, did you form this community advisory group after you already had the structure for the bond and then ask them for feedback? Is that how that worked?
Yeah. So I'll say that I think we were a little late in establishing this committee. I think we should have established it earlier. But yes, basically, we had the basic structure, and then we gave it to them and said to them, we would like you to suggest modifications. For example, the home ownership modification. But we told them that we said the amount of the bond is $95 million. Within that, there's some fungibility. And so we asked them for their recommendations within that. we knew, we had set priorities, and our priorities are a lot like your priorities that Larry presented. You know, the rental, housing, homelessness, you know, with other things as well. But we weren't, you know, if they had come to us and said, we want to turn this into home ownership subsidy, we wouldn't have done it. So we gave them broad guidelines and then asked for them to come back to us with changes.
What was the makeup of your committee? Like, how many people were on it? What groups from the community? What did it look like?
It wasn't large. I would say it was 15 people, roughly 15 people. Karen Lotto here was there to staff it. My assistant was also at all of those meetings. And it was, so we had some people who were tenants, so the Durham Housing Authority and other tenants. We had people from the Latino Community Credit Union, Self-Help Credit Union. We had a developer. We had people from the Durham Committee on the Affairs of Black People and the People's Alliance. Our kind of, Durham is very much an organizational town when it comes to elections, and we know that we knew we needed their buy-in and interest. So they were in the room. Affordable housing developers and advocates. So it was a small group. Let me just say about that process, and this is a choice you could make, and I think we made the right one in our case, but I think that, you know, you could go a different direction. Their process, we did not ask them to do a public process. You know, a lot of times in Durham, and I know you all do too, you have big public processes, but what we felt like was the election was going to be the big public process. That once we had this, there was going to be a ton of community discussion and debate. And, you know, I and other people were speaking all over town about the bond. So we had a big public process, but we didn't feel like we needed that to be run by this committee. So you could make a different choice.
Okay. And Ms. Stewart?
Marshall, I feel like one of the things that y'all did really well was kind of own and tackle the conversation around gentrification. And really, to your credit, I heard you out there talking with press a lot about the issue of gentrification. And I'm wondering kind of where that went in this process. I see the neighborhood stabilization programs, but wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that we're doing a lot of, so when you think about the housing we're doing on the downtown properties of the Durham Housing Authority, this is building in places where development is not, in those particular properties, development is not dense. It is, so you're building new housing, you're creating mixed income communities, and that really wasn't a problem for people when they're thinking about gentrification. What is a problem, of course, is what's happening, but so I can make the case that this is, and I did make the case, that this is something that fights gentrification. We're just creating more, not only more supply, but more affordable supply. But what I think is really on people's mind is, can they stay in their house that they're in? And are they going to be driven out? Mm-hmm. And that's what our neighborhood stabilization is about. So there are several aspects to that stabilization. One of them you all do already, which is home repair. And I noticed that one of the slides had $72,000. Home repair can be very expensive. So we have to think about both major repairs and minor repairs. But we added home repair money, about $4.6 million over the 5 years, which is more than we have been spending. And also, I'll say our Duke University is adding $500,000 a year to that home repair. So we feel like home repair is one of the most important ways. It's probably the most important way to keep a long-term low-income homeowner in their home. If you can't pay your rent, I'm sorry, you pay your mortgage. Maybe your mortgage is paid off. Maybe you're getting a little bit of retirement, and you're doing okay in your home until you need a roof. And, you know, then you get the call from that predatory buyer. Mm-hmm. You sell. So we want to help people. Home repair, I think, is super important as a way to fight gentrification. Another way is just so we have the Durham Community Land Trustees. They bought 54 units in East Durham. single units and duplexes, they are in bad shape. They need to be repaired. If they want to keep them permanently affordable, they needed our subsidy. So we're beginning to subsidize that. So small scale subsidies in gentrifying neighborhoods. I already talked about the property tax outreach and education. We think that we know that taxes, so this is a tax increase. The bond is a tax increase. And taxes are going up mainly not because of the tax increases we're putting in, but because of the value of the homes are going up all around them. And so we feel like this tax outreach for people who have the availability of the state program and can't and haven't accessed it is important. And then the eviction diversion, those are the things. I think that the thing that we haven't taken on, but we have asked our city and county administrations to come to us with is property tax relief. We know that we can't differentially tax people from their property, but we have had a pilot program, a not successful pilot program, for the last 3 years in several neighborhoods where we basically give grants between what the previous, if you're of a certain income level, between what your property and your long-term homeowner, what your property was taxed at and what it's taxed at now. For lots of reasons, it hasn't been successful. So we've asked our administrations to come back to us and say, can we provide a tax relief for some of our long-term low-income homeowners? It's going to be hard to figure it out, how deeply we can do it. Can we we need the county to be cooperative. They have the tax office, and they have most of the taxes. In Durham County, they're 60% of the property tax. So we have to have their buy-in. That's a long way of saying we haven't got the problem solved, but we're working on it.
So I know with the displacement issue, which is a huge concern right now about folks being able to stay in their residences, that increasing tax, because it develops around them, then their tax base increases tax value. So your bond provides the property tax outreach, homeowner education. There's a line item for that. So that's just helping folks get educated on other resources that may be out there that can help them with the underlying issue.
Two things really we've conceived of it as. One is alternatives to predatory sale, and the other is the outreach around the state tax credit, state tax relief. I think those are the two things that we're. And the alternatives to predatory. Whenever I say we, one of my areas of expertise is taking credit for things I have nothing to do with. So I'm looking to Karen and Charlie, but especially to Karen because she's the one that really knows.
And then the predatory sale piece, is there envisioning a program where folks can get a better assessment of what the fair market value of their home for folks who do wish to sell? Is that what's rolled up in there? Yes, and the fact that there actually are, you can get a decent loan instead of having to, instead of predatory sale. I mean, there are alternatives that exist in the current market. Did I say that correctly, Karen? Thank you.
Mayor, did you have any transit representatives on this committee? So it wasn't just focused just on affordable housing, but also on the land use and how transit ties in with that.
We have a group that's very active called the Coalition for Affordable Housing and Transit, and so we did. In fact, Mayor, former Mayor Wib Gully was the co-chair of the committee, and Wib was, as you know, the former counsel for Go Triangle, and so we did have transit folks there on the committee as well.
Okay, thank you.
And excuse me.
You've been very quiet today. I was wondering if you were okay.
You infected me and I'm still sick, so don't get near her.
I can talk now.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
So just a few things. I applaud Durham for many things. I think the first, obviously, that you've already talked about is the focus and acknowledgement of race and economic justice in this entire plan. And I think that is an area that this council will need to, the conversations that we'll need to start having as well. And so thank you for kind of spearheading that and giving us a model to follow. And the second that stands out to me is your willingness to create pilot programs and to say we tried something and it didn't work. And I think that that's something that our mayor has made very clear that we will try to do. But one of the areas that is really interesting to me is some of the partnerships that you all created outside of kind of the normal scope of what would be expected. And so one of the areas I wanted to hear a little bit more about from you was around the Durham Land Trust and what that partnership looks like. Because if I'm not mistaken, you also, Self-Help Credit Union is a part of that work. And I just think that that model in general is fascinating and has been really helpful in many cities, and would love to hear from you kind of how that has worked.
I really couldn't hear your voice, Mr. Martin.
Sorry.
So our philosophy is that we finance these things. We provide the subsidy, I should say, and other people who know how to do the work do the work. So for the Affordable Housing Loan Fund, we provide the top loss. The city provides a couple $1 million. We work with, in the beginning it was the late Dr. Fail Wynn, former vice president of Duke University, worked with us to try to bring people in as other investors in the fund. After Fail passed away, folks from Self-Help picked it up, that leadership, along with Karen, and to recruit these private partners. That's a model for this fund that's been used other places. We didn't invent any of this, I should say. There's not a single thing in here that we invented, I'm sure. All of these things will be done by other people. So RFPs for landlord engagement, to find the nonprofit that can do that best. RFPs for we have money to subsidize gap financing for 4% tax projects now that you all have done so well. We'll put out an RFP and we'll see who comes forward. Sometimes people come to us, but a lot of times this is done through an RFP process. We're fortunate now that DHIC has come back to Durham. Greg, thank you, wherever you are. DHIC is an asset that you all have in Raleigh that is a tremendous asset, and they are now back in Durham, involved in our affordable housing work. So, indeed, I mean that's the way we do it.
Okay, we're kind of running along. You have not asked a question yet, David. So.
I also want to say, yeah, I appreciate the mayor's work on this and your leadership, as well as the city of Durham's. And this is a regional issue, really and truly. I want to touch on another related regional issue that our mayor opened the door to, so we're glad to have you here. We're going to dig a little bit more into the transportation transit relationship to affordable housing. Not to really focus on the past, but how is Durham looking to work these two together as well? And I'm sure you're aware of Raleigh's transit plan and BRTs in particular, the idea of incentivizing affordable housing along those corridors, some other ideas that we can link the two and make those work because they go hand in hand for affordable housing.
Yeah, super important, I agree. We were ahead of you all on transit. Not anymore. And you all have a wonderful plan, and I know you're excited about it, and I'm envious. The light rail line was to go right through downtown, where we have density, and if you've been to Durham lately, you see cranes in the air. We're having tremendous growth in that area. But if you know anything about the Charlotte lines, you know that they don't have much affordability around the Charlotte light rail lines. And so our opportunity is in that we do have a lot of publicly owned land downtown, mainly owned by the Durham Housing Authority, but not only. The county is putting affordable housing on two of its building parking lots, parking decks, whole nother question. But it is putting affordable housing there. A lot of it, 200-300 units, and that's downtown. The housing authority sites that we're developing are downtown, right where our transit is dense, and we will get regional transit. It will go through downtown. It's going to be a little while, And so I think that the key is if you have, the key for us is that we have land downtown that's usable. I don't know Raleigh's situation in that regard. I did hear Larry talking about the fact that you all have some land that you've sold off, but we feel like this is an opportunity. We have our police headquarters, our old police headquarters site, also downtown, which we just sold, but we sold it under certain conditions. We asked the developers that applied for this to come to us, and we set certain, I don't know if we'd call them conditions or goals. And that one of those goals that they had to provide at least 80 units of affordable housing. Mm-hmm. And so that was another way in which, during the development, we leveraged some affordable housing downtown. So absolutely, I think the key is you have to use your publicly available land, because it's really hard to, you may have we have a really strong density bonus that no one uses. Because Raleigh is growing up faster, higher, faster, you may have more of an opportunity to get people to use your density bonus, but we have not.
From what I understand, density bonuses have not worked in many communities. So
I think that you have to have a real huge demand for density and height for them to work. And we don't have that yet. And I don't know where you all are on that curve, We're way behind you all. Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Buffkin or Mr. Cox, do you have a question? No, thank you. You good? Okay.
Councilmember Cox is still very sick.
That's not my fault. I'm sorry. A little history here. I had a terrible cold, laryngitis, whatnot, and it has kind of spread through some of the council. I can talk now and nobody else can. So,
Hey, I'm fine. I haven't gotten sick.
Okay.
I'm good.
So anyhow, Mayor, I really want to thank you, Karen, Charlie, and his wonderful coat for being here today. Brian O'Haver, I think I saw him in the audience. You need to go check out where Charlie got his coat. I mean, I think. Okay. Well, I want to thank you all so much for being here today. This was really helpful, wealth of information. Congratulations on the bond passage by 77%. That's pretty awesome. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you all.
So that was so interesting. I had to remind myself to look at the clock, and it is about 12:49. Larry, do you and Ken want to come back up now and maybe go over some of the list? I also have some questions and some comments that, since I'm the only one who has a voice, Oh, Nicole, you'll find it?
Oh, I've got it.
Okay, good. We're going to have some questions and comments, but if you could go back to that one slide.
This one?
Yes.
Okay. I'll let Ken come up.
Ken's right beside you, other way. He snuck up. Ken, are you going to take this on, policy?
Be happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. Can you, so the increased density in cottage courts, that went through, but it was modified based on what was brought through the Planning Commission. So my understanding is they are not allowed in R2 or R4, and there was a limit on the maximum number of units?
That's correct. The limit was lowered from 30 to 15, and they were removed as a permitted housing option in the R2 and R4 districts.
So if we want to revert back to the original that went through the Planning Commission, what do we need to do that?
You need to refer a text change to the Planning Commission.
Okay. Can we ask that be on our next agenda in January?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Certainly.
Okay.
This is a good time to give us that feedback about what to bring back to you.
Okay. The town has some private streets. Can you talk a little bit more about that? I know that, having talked with a lot of members of our development community, they say it's almost impossible to build townhomes here because of some of the street requirements. Does that help fix that, or is this another issue?
It should go a long way to fixing that. So when the UDO was adopted, there was a prohibition on any new lots that did not front on a public street. And
Right.
since townhouses sit on their own individual lots, the townhouse lots had to front on a public street. As the cottage court, one of the things the cottage court text change did is allowed you to subdivide your cottage court so that the units sat on fee simple lots. But in order to do that, you had to get rid of that prohibition. And so while we were at it, we also allowed townhouse lots to not front on public streets. You still may have to build public streets for other connectivity requirements in the UDO, but within the blocks, you can further put in a network of private drives and put your townhouses on those.
Okay. The reduced parking requirements, just to clarify, that's coming back to us at the next council meeting,
It
correct?
is. I just
Okay.
approved the agenda item this morning.
Excellent, thank you. Who else has questions?
I have a question here.
Ms. Stewart,
Go ahead.
first.
Sorry.
You're next. Corey.
The by right expedited approvals what is the thinking behind that presently?
Well, the thing about by right approval is two things. It's lower risk, and if it's lower risk, theoretically there should be a lower cost of capital for a project that's by right versus that which requires a discretionary approval, because whenever there's a discretionary approval, there's always the opportunity that it's going to take longer, or that you might spend some upfront money and then end up with nothing because you don't get the approval that you were looking for.
Is that
So-
by right for affordable housing projects or by right for?
Yeah, I mean, the issue for affordable housing projects is because they are often inherently controversial, that anything that has to go through a discretionary process, such as a rezoning, is going to be a greater risk for an affordable housing developer than a site that's already zoned for that use. Now, Raleigh's code puts a lot of emphasis on by right approvals, and so typically if you're able to meet code requirements, you can do most things by right, but some things have required variances, and we are constantly needing to fine tune our ordinance to make sure that if a goal of ours is to put more conforming projects through a by right process, that we have the right rules in place so that more projects can go that route.
I mean, I'd love to see what a policy could look like around by right approval for affordable housing projects. I know there's a lot of nuance in that, but
Let's get through these. Mr. Branch, you had a,
Yeah, it goes to our duplexes. This has been one of mine for the last 2 years.
Right.
I know it's been in committee, it hasn't come back out, but how we allow duplexes in some of our residential zones, and it may help us balance that issue between height for some communities, because we're just putting a lot of where we normally have single-family homes, we're now saying, okay, you can do a duplex. Where are we with that rewriting of the text?
I think the issue, well, we have not been authorized to rewrite the text, and we have generated some ideas. Those ideas have been presented to the committee, but there's been no action taken on them to date. Duplexes are kind of in a sweet spot because they're under the same building code as detached single-family and townhouses, the 1 and 2 family building code. And so as soon as you get more than 2 units in a building, you're in a different building code with some higher costs associated with that. So duplexes might be an easy lift. I think the issue has been in a lot of the neighborhoods where we like to see duplexes, you're still limited to the same number of units per acre that you are for detached single family, and a duplex unit, because it's attached, is going to be worth less. So the single family is still the highest and best use. So one of the rationales for the cottage court increasing the density was to allow cottage courts to compete for land with detached single family. I think if we wanted to see more duplexes, we would have to let them breach the density limit of the R zones, because in many of these neighborhoods where we'd like to see duplexes, it's just the single family is able to outbid them for the land.
so we need policy changes then that would make that easier to do?
Yeah, I mean, an idea that was explored, we were asked by the committee at one point to research what Asheville did. Asheville has a net lot area per unit as opposed to dwelling units per acre, and it sounds kind of the same, but the difference is that they say if you want just as an example, if you want to put 1 unit on a piece of land, you have to have a 4,000 square foot lot minimum. But if you have another 5,000 square feet, you can put 2 units, and if you have 6,000 square feet, you can put 3. And so the density kind of goes up. you don't have to assemble twice as much land to do twice as many units. Now, that is a very, very different zoning scheme than what we have here in Raleigh. But I think that the idea of keying units off of land area as opposed to just having a blanket units per acre might be a more flexible way to approach missing middle if that's a road that the council wants to go down.
Okay, Mr. Melton?
Yeah, so this may be an overly basic question that could be answered by someone who didn't just get sworn in 2 weeks ago, but in my opinion, I think we have a lot of work to come up with what we're going to do for affordable housing. But for housing affordability, I think we need to be moving on this stuff as quickly as possible. So for housing options, what committee is this duplex issue in, and how can we get it back?
It is not in committee now. That's part of the, what we're going to discuss today. One of the things I would like to do is ask staff to come back to us at our next meeting with the low-hanging fruit that we can tackle. So,
That'd be this whole list?
well, no, because there's only so much staff we can do, but
Oh, yeah.
maybe 3 to 5 issues, low-hanging fruit, some things that might take a little more time. When I look at this, it seems to me the missing middle piece is important to this council. We want to move forward on that. But, you are all the professional staff. We would like to hear from you. What are the 3 to 5 things that could have the most impact in the quickest way and help us accomplish our goals of not only encouraging housing affordability, but also helping us with the affordable housing piece? Will you do that, Mr. Bowers?
Yes,
Okay.
we will do that.
Everybody in agreement with that?
That's fine.
Okay. I do have a question not related to this, one that keeps coming up, but tax increment financing has been used in Charlotte for this purpose. I'm wondering if we could ask you to look at synthetic TIF or TIF financing in areas that are ripe for redevelopment, that haven't been redeveloped. It could be in relation to the Downtown South project, Dix Park, Tower Shopping Center, which nothing has been happening for years. Again,
Right.
you all have the expertise, but I'm thinking it's time we look at that issue, and would like for you to do that and start the prep work on that. I'm not asking for a report back at the next council meeting, you'll be happy to know. But take some time and work amongst yourselves to figure that out. Maybe start in a 90-day window, come back to council with some of your findings. Is that a reasonable time frame?
I think it is. I believe the equitable development around transit initiative has that as one of the tools it's looking at. And we have done some noodling with the idea in the past, and we can pull out some of that work and update it.
Okay. I think that's something that has a little bit of a sense of urgency for us. So everybody good with that? Mm-hmm. Good? Okay. And the third thing, well, there's a fourth thing now. I have a question, and I see Christine Kushner here. Yes, there you are, from the Board of Education. One of the things that was mentioned was land disposition. And, we own land. Some of it's under-resourced. Some of it's very valuable. The county owns land. The school owns land. How can we all work together to identify parcels that make sense to offer up to, say, the development community for affordable housing, mixed income housing, whether it be Teachers Village or an art colony, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of talk out there, but how can we all work together to identify that land so it's a very cohesive type of effort and not just the city doing one thing, the county doing its thing, the schools doing its thing? Can we have that conversation and figure that out?
Yes, we can do that. I think the city has a pretty good idea of its own holdings, and certainly our Housing and Neighborhoods Department has done a lot to try to take their holdings, which have been acquired in the city's redevelopment areas over decades, and put them into productive use. We have the downtown disposition strategy identified a couple of sites that were of sufficient scale to potentially host a tax credit project, and we may have some other holdings elsewhere that would be use. I think what would be good is to get together with the county and with the public school system to see what they have that might meet a housing purpose as well. And I would be happy to have our real estate manager, Ralph Ritchie, take a leading role on that. I think he has already done some work on it to date.
Okay. Christine, is that something we need formal channels on from the mayor to the chair of the school board, or is that a message that you can go back and deliver to the Board of Education? Awesome. Thank you so much. Bless you. And then the fourth thing I had, Mr. Branch, you asked a really good question about process and how building trust was so important. One of the things that we're going to have to do is create a committee to move forward on this, but we are not just looking at a housing affordability bond, we're also looking at a parks and parks equity bond. And I understand from the research that's been done is they have to appear separately on the ballot. However, I think there's a lot of value in messaging one bond, like what we're trying to achieve. It's a quality of life bond. We're really trying to improve the quality of life through parks and housing for our residents. And the second piece is and I'm going to need your help with this, Mr. Jarvis. I'm trying to remember, I know we've run parks and transportation bonds separately in the past, but I believe that we've used one committee.
2011, it was one committee.
Okay. I think we need to have a discussion about that one committee versus two committees, and want to know where your thoughts might be on this.
With the scale of what I believe these two bonds will look like, I kind of think we need two committees to do some deep diving. But I'm open to the conversation of that one committee working. We just have to look at the size of that committee to make sure we have the skill sets and the representation across the communities to be able to represent both subject matters within the committee.
Mr. Jarvis?
I might suggest that hopefully, since the chamber might be the lead entity and kind of leading that campaign, that we get their input.
I think that's an excellent idea. And then we will have other partners involved. Could you do the legwork on some of that and report back to us? Will the second meeting in January, is that enough time?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And we'll have that discussion then.
Yeah, definitely. While we have Larry, can I ask a question?
Of course.
I noticed Durham worked a lot with the Durham Housing Authority. Can we, and I know the housing authorities do a lot with low-income residents. Probably maybe by that second meeting in January or sometime in January in an update, can we see where our Raleigh Housing Authority goals are? I know I've seen their properties, I've been on tours, I know the numbers as far as vouchers needed, but what's the plan to try to help turn the curve as far as helping those in the low income range as far as housing? And I know we use affordable housing, that's the HUD standard and term, and we focus around the 60%. We're doing more, a little lower, but the main goal of the Housing Authority has been 30% and below. So if we could get, I think, educating the entire council on that, what's the role of the Raleigh Housing Authority, what are their plans, and how their plans, along with what we're trying to do with the bond, can work together to really help all residents.
We can do that, but I also want to make sure that you heard the message that the Mayor Schul had about
Yes.
The effectiveness and efficiency of the Raleigh Housing Authority compared to.
Right.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yep, I heard the message loud and clear.
That's a very different situation, and yes, very different situation.
Yeah, and that's why I'm publicly making the request, so I'm sure they're hearing my request as well.
Does anybody else have any questions? Or Patrick, I think you were first, then Mr. Martin, then Ms. Stewart.
Mr. Jarvis, I'm looking at your side 17 titled Affordable Housing Investment. It's the bar graph with going back to FY 2011. It's slide 17 in my materials.
Now, I cannot guarantee you there's not an error in here. This was a presentation that was put together by a committee, and I will never do that again. Never.
I think it's back one more. So my question, yes, the one, thank you. And my question is, what are the other category that shows up there in light green? What are those financing revenues?
I think those were proceeds from the sale of properties.
So I'll
Does
help
Nikki-
with that a little bit. So one of the things that, as it relates to the land disposition question that the mayor asked, was that the city council approved a land disposition study, which I believe we sent to the council based on an inquiry. And that disposition study picked different parcels and had a strategy associated what was the particular use. And so for some of the uses of those parcels, the staff recommendation and council approved was to sell the property at that point for proceeds, which were then placed into affordable housing units. So it's not always that you use the land for development of affordable housing on that site. It could be, well, the better use is to sell it to the highest bidder, then take the proceeds and move it into these affordable housing investments. And so what you're seeing is some of the benefits of that.
Like we did at 301 Hillsborough.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So that's what some of those proceeds are.
So then that option has a natural limit. You can
That's
only
correct.
sell the land you have. So how long could we count on this, for the last 5 years, looks like about $2 to $4 million. How long would that be available to us in this other category?
I think we probably have pretty much exhausted things of that nature. All of these are in the downtown area.
There's a couple left that are significant, but the basic premise is we have definitely already acted upon some of the most obvious and lowest hanging fruit. There's a few more out there, but the reason they haven't advanced is because they have some naturally occurring barriers to making it simple, which we can talk about.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Mr. Martin?
Thank you. I want to build off of Councilman Branch's comments just about kind of looking at external partners and really thinking about strategic options that we have as a council to grow our list of partners in this work. So what comes to mind is the existing Raleigh Land Trust, but then also looking at other finance options as well. So the fact that the Durham Land Trust was working with a self-help credit union, where else can we be looking to maximize our investments, I think is really crucial in this process so that we're not just going it alone. And I know that the mayor has said that as well. But I think looking outside of governmental partners is important too. So I would just ask that at some point when the time is appropriate that we kind of have that conversation.
I worked very closely with Durham Community Land Trustees for many years, so yes.
And well, the other thing is in Charlotte, you had a lot of the banks come forward with financing. We've seen that in Durham with SunTrust as well. I guess now Truist, but those are options, and there are a number of potential banking partners having those internal conversations right now. So Mr. Jarvis is aware of that and working on that. So, but good point.
Yeah, thank you.
To the point about partnering with municipal partners, I would love for us to consider having Lorena McDowell from the county come in and give us a presentation on what the county is now doing on affordable housing, in part because I want to make sure that we have a good understanding of the work they're doing and their priorities so that we can best coordinate our priorities. I think one thing we didn't hear from Durham is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, the city makes up 80% of the county, and so there's much more partnership there and kind of overlap in what they're doing because it's one thing, whereas Raleigh is one of 12 or so municipalities in the county.
Completely different animal, yes.
Completely different animal, and want to make sure that we are on the same page with the county, and that as well our residents know why we've been focused on rental production, and the county is really more focused on a deeper subsidy for lower income residents. So really making sure that narrative is clear, so we can set the best priority and goals that we need to for this
I
bond.
think Lorena's here today.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
There she
over
is,
there.
I didn't
Yes.
see her.
Yeah, she's
So
been here.
we'll get together with her and we'll plan for her
Superstar.
to come back and do exactly what you asked for.
I think it would be great if she could come back during a work session. I'm sure there's going to be other topics that come up that we need to discuss. One thing I did want to ask too, Mr. Jarvis, when you come back with a proposal for stakeholder group, could you also, I know you've done work, like preliminary work on toward a bond and what that might look like. Could you bring that forward as well?
Say that again?
I know that you've done preliminary work on a potential housing bond.
Correct.
Could you
Yes.
bring that with you when you bring forward the information on a proposed steering committee or advisory committee?
We can do that, yes.
Can you bring that so we start the hard work, which
Yes.
is pulling this together? Okay. Anybody have anything else?
No, I just want to say thank you for the work that you have done and will do for us as we move forward.
I want to thank everybody who came out today. As Ruffin said, so close to the holidays, but we really appreciate you all being here. This is the first step in all of us moving forward on what we feel is a very urgent need to move forward on housing in our community. Housing choices, housing affordability, affordable housing. So while you had a chance to listen today, you will have a chance to speak and have your voices heard at future dates as we start moving forward on specific, shall we say, proposals. That way, you know, there will be public hearings, you will have an opportunity to speak up and be heard. So, and of course, you can always email us your ideas, which you do a pretty good job of. So thank you very much. I'm going to call meeting over. Thank you.